My name is Thomas Nuzzo. That's an Italian name. In Italian, it's pronounced Nuzzo. In English, Nuzzo. In Korean, Nuzzo. And I was born in New York City, Manhattan, 1930. My parents came from Sicily, the island of Sicily. They met here in America, married, and I was the first child. And I attended school in New York. When the Korean War started, I was in college. And
What college?
Fordham University, School of Education. And I was drafted, as most of the American soldiers in Korea were draftees. You know, not regular army.
Right.
They had very small regular army at that time. We were drafted, and
When were you drafted?
I was drafted in 1953, during the last year of the war. So I spent the end of the war there, and then I came home in '54. They only kept us there about a year. Most men, because they rotated us very much. During the 3 years, I understand that about 1.25 million Americans served in Korea.
Yeah.
Because of the constant rotation.
Yeah. What did you study at Fordham University?
School of Education,
Yeah.
teaching, and also philosophy. I majored in philosophy. When I came out of the Army with the GI Bill, I returned to school, and I have a master's in history, philosophy, or education.
Wow.
I studied PhD for philosophy, and that's the educational and background.
So when Korean War broke out on June
Yeah, I was in
25th of
school.
1950, you were in
I
Fordham
was in
University?
school, right,
Fordham
right.
University?
Yes.
So, because you were in college, you were highly educated, and so were you aware of Korea? What was the people's response, and what did you think about it?
You know, all my life I was interested in history. And I started collecting stamps in the 8th grade. So I already knew there was such a place as Korea, spelled with a C. And it was in the album, it was Chosan and Korea, Korea. And so I already knew something. I knew there was such a place, and so forth and so on. And then I was always interested in art. I did some art myself, so I knew about Asian art. So I wasn't really going to a completely strange place. You know, 99% of the Americans didn't even know there was a country named Korea. Most of us didn't even know, let alone where it was or anything about it. But having said that, it was still quite an experience to go from the streets of Manhattan to the mountains of North Korea in little villages, and then see how the people lived, how different. You know, the bottom line is we're all human and we're all basically the same, but on the outside we can be very different.
So when Korean War broke out, and were you worried that you might be drafted?
No,
and what was your reaction?
When you're young, you think you're immortal. No young person fears anything. That's why war is really something for young people. I cannot imagine the professional soldier of today, who might be 30 or 35 years old and has a wife and children and has to go to the front. How can he concentrate? I was old. I was one of the older soldiers in Korea. Most of them were 18, 19 years old. I was already 22 by the time I got there. So it's a different world completely, different world. And I'll tell you, when I used to write home, I'll tell you a couple of the things that impressed me enough to write to my mother. You know, here you have to take your shoes off when you go inside that. That was a big, that's a big difference. Got to take your shoes off. Oh, and they carry the babies on their back. Those were two big things that impressed me,
Very interesting. So what kind of basic training did you go through?
I was infantry rifleman. I went through the regular basic then. Regular basic was 8 weeks, which everyone went through. And then at the end of 8 weeks, you were specialized, armor, artillery, whatever. And I continued in infantry. And also, after the next 8, I continued in leadership school, infantry. So when I went to Korea, I went as a rifleman.
So when did you leave for Korea?
Okay, we left March, and we went from Seattle by ship to Sasebo, Japan, and then from Sasebo to Busan,
When
and
did
then
you
by
arrive?
train from Busan to Chuncheon. Then in Chuncheon we got on trucks and went all the way up, because my first assignment was on the Soyangang River at a village called Kwandari, which was the headquarters for the 10th Corps and the 1st Rock Army. The number 1
Yeah.
ROK.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, when the fighting stopped, we started to do training of the 1st Rock Army. So I spent part of 53 training the 1st Rock Army. I didn't actually reach the combat line. Along the way, as we were going up, they took some of us out. Like, it was a little dramatic. It was the middle of the night, we're in this truck, we're going up north, and the truck stops, and the officer said, you, get out. They put us in a tent, an empty tent. He said, go to sleep, I'll pick you up tomorrow morning. And when I got up, I was in the headquarters company. So I was, I actually didn't go to the exact line.
Okay,
So I spent that time in the headquarters. Now, when the armistice started, that's when we started training 1st Rock Army. And then when we finished that, we had a big ceremony. They called it turning over of the command. And 10th Corps turned over command of that whole area and site over to the 1st Rock Army.
what was it like
And-
working in the headquarters?
Well, it was like almost like an office job.
Mhm.
It was you got up in the morning, you did your duty. If you had to do guard duty or whatever, or you worked in the office. I worked also in the office, came 5, 6 o'clock or something. You went to your tent and you were off.
So maybe because you are highly educated, so you were selected as a office soldier, right?
Maybe
Uh-huh.
in the army, it doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that way?
No, because I was trained to be an infantry leader. So why would you pull me out and put me in a tent?
Mhm.
In the army, they just grab you, and you might be a cook, but they need a rifleman, they grab you, go over there, you're a rifleman.
Do you remember who was in charge of that headquarters?
Yeah, the American general was Clark, and the Korean general was Paek Sun-yu.
백선엽.
Okay,
Mhm.
now, the ceremony, I have the program in my collection, and it has both their names. Half of it is in Korean, half of it is in English, the program telling the chain of command, change. And it's interesting, what's interesting, the Korean side is written in Hanguk, but it's also written with the Chinese character. I have met General Paek Sun-yu.
Mhm.
Yeah, 2 times since that time.
Since that. So I want to ask you more about this cooperation between U.S. and Korean military there.
It was very good, very strong. I worked with the Korean, we worked. Actually, we were working more on the command level, telling them our experience and how we would do something. And, because at that time, there was really, when the war broke out, there was almost no Korean army, really. It was just a few men with a couple of rifles, because from my understanding later, reading, America was afraid that Sigmund Rhee, if he had a real army, would go into North Korea and try to unite. So they were afraid, they kept them really unarmed.
How was the communication?
Well, there was always, for instance, if I was meeting with, let's say, an army colonel, Korean Army ROK, we call them ROK, R-O-K,
Yeah.
Republic of Korea,
Yeah.
ROK, there would be at least one interpreter, who maybe a lieutenant or something, and he would be our communication.
Was translator really
Yeah, he would
okay?
know his English good, yeah.
Uh-huh. So you didn't have any problem in
No,
communication?
there were many Koreans that knew English very well. In fact, you saw the picture of the friend that I made, Han. He could speak and write English. And when I left, he gave me a goodbye letter. Beautiful English, beautifully written, So there were many that could speak English.
Could you speak about the General Peck? Any
Well,
memory?
I never had direct contact with the general level, but I did meet him later, and like I met him in Seoul at a reunion, and I met him in Washington at one of these. He came, and all I had to say to him was Kwandari, the name of the town, and he beamed because everybody knew Kwandari was where, the headquarters, First Rock Army, 10th Corps, and then we told you, remember Kwandari? Yes. Now, what he did on his own, many years after the war, he put up a monument there at Kwandari.
Yes.
There are several stone monuments, depicting a map of the area and the units. Yeah.
So the American soldiers and General Clark, you said, right?
Yeah, his name was Clark. General
They were really working together well, and the
As far
cooperation
as I
was
know.
smooth with the Korean.
As far as I know, maybe somebody else has a different, but we worked very well together.
How many were in headquarters?
Oh, there were a lot of people, because you had every department of an army had to have somebody there, and every department was teaching the ROK Army to create that department in the ROK. So you had G1, G2, G4, all the way down, education, this, that. Everybody was there, everybody. It was big,
Mm-hmm. And what was the main thing that you were educating Korean
I did
Army?
I did a lot of troop information and education. I guess maybe because of my background, they steered me that way.
What do you
So-
mean by troop information?
Well, there's a department where you educate the troops about whatever it is you're going to educate, maybe about where you are, because usually they try to give you some kind of orientation on where you are and how to act, don't do this with Korean, don't do that, you got to do this, you don't do that, and, to keep relations good. And then actual education of, like we used to try to help the GIs, if they didn't graduate high school, give them courses. We had teachers actually come up there to teach. At the actual physical headquarters, I think it was more the organizational, and then when you got out of the headquarters and you were more in the field, there was more of the field education. The actual, like, getting somebody, putting him in a tank and teaching him. That we didn't do exactly at the headquarters. Actually, I did not directly work with Katusa.
Then
None of the people I met, I think Katusa were more in the field. I think they were more in the actual field. Like, if you went up to the artillery position or something, you would find the Katusa. Because in fact, they were actually in American units. They were not really a separate, they would be in the infantry unit. He would be a Katusa, but he was with the Americans, so to learn firsthand.
So then you must have worked with the Korean Army direct. right?
Yeah, I only worked with Army officers.
Mm-hmm. Could you tell me about your relationship with them, or any person that you still remember or in contact?
Well, I'm really sorry that I didn't take the lieutenant's name, because how many years later? I left Korea in '54. My first revisit was in 1989. So I think now, if I had his name, when I visited in '89, I could have called, tried to find him. I could have asked the Army, where is he now? It would have been nice to meet him again, because we became friendly, and for instance, I would go to the PX and buy some cologne, men's cologne or something, and I would give it to him,
I saw a Korean newspaper script that you were looking for man's last name H-A-N, Han, right?
Han
And
Chang-bin
Han Chang-bin. And
and Park In-ja.
could you talk about that?
Okay, I readily talk. I've said this 1,000 times to Koreans, and I could say it another 1,000, because I think the story is beautiful. I became friends with Han. He's the young man that could read and write English. He was like what they call a tent boy, a house boy,
How old was he?
The exact age I don't know, but when the war finished and we had to leave 10th Corps, he returned to his home in Wonju and went to high school. And the picture I have of him, he's in his high school uniform, Japanese style uniform they used to have, the boys. Now, and we became very close, and if I was able to get a Jeep, or something, I would take him to Chuncheon, because that was like going to the big city, even though Chuncheon at that time was nothing. It was all dirt and a few wooden buildings, but it was better than up in the mountains, and we would go there. And what we did was, I would bring saltine crackers, a can of tuna fish, a couple of cans of beer, and we would go to Chuncheon, we'd go up on the hill, we'd sit and we'd make it like a little picnic, and that's when the kids would come. That's, if you remember the picture of me with the kids in front of me, that on one of those occasions the kids would come, and we give them crackers or chocolate, whatever, because right away they would say, chocolate GI, or chewing gum. The interesting thing about what happened with Han, okay, so now, and Inja, when I left, I never saw them again, or I lost complete contact. At that time, I didn't even know where I was, actually. I mean, I knew Kwandari because it was the headquarters, and they said, but then when I was transferred to Chuncheon area, Gangwon-do area, I was in a little village, and I really didn't even know where I was. So, as I said, when I visited Korea in '89, and 90 or 91 again, and I had made Korean friends, and they put that story in the paper, and somebody called the paper and said, I'm a friend of Han. That was in America, because that came out in the Korea Times in New York, and said, Han died relatively young, but he was already married and had 2 children, and he gave the newspaper the telephone number of the wife. He said she's living in Busan. So in turn, they gave it to my Korean friends, and when I visited Korea, one of my Korean friends, who happened to be a general in the Korean Army, 20 years younger than me, took me to Busan, and I met his wife.
Wow.
And son. And I have pictures of them in those pictures. And I met them, they gave me pictures, she gave me pictures of wedding picture, and pictures of the children when they were younger. But the important thing that happened, which, you never know what's going to happen, and if a good or bad's going to come from something. I tried to keep contact with the son. because he spoke some English, you know. By that time they was and one day, I don't remember if, I think he called me and he said, you know, they want to draft me, time I have to go in the army. He says, but what's going to happen to my mother? She wasn't well, you know. She was almost like an invalid, you know. He said, who's going to take care of her? So I said, okay, let me talk to General Park. So I called General Park, and Park had visited with me, the family, so he was there. He met the son, he met the, he saw, they lived in a very poor area, And he said, you know, this boy is very good, he's really taking care of his mother, sacrificing. And so General Park said, let me look into it. I get a call from General Park, he says, you know, I explained the situation to the draft board, and they're not gonna take him. They're gonna let him stay home, take care of his mother. So.
Wow, you did.
Well, I didn't, just the fact that I met the father, and that we became friends, and that my Korean friends decided to put the story in the paper. So you never know, one thing builds on another and another. Now, you want to hear a little bit about Inja?
Inja?
You know, Pak Inja, the little girl, the young lady.
Yeah, briefly.
There's a little story about her, which is a little cute. Okay, so they're looking for her too. So when I visit Korea, General Park and my other friend who was a medical...
Who was Inja?
Inja is the young lady that I have pictures of.
Yeah, right, but
and
how
she's
did you...
in the article.
How did you come to know of her?
Okay, I used to walk around the village taking pictures of the people, the children, the farm, and that's how I met her.
Okay.
I saw her one day, another day, hello, hello, hello. You know, she spoke a few words in English, but at that time I knew more Korean. I wanted to communicate, so I went out of my way, I tried to study. So I knew basic Korean. And we met and we were together. And so now after we separated, you know, like I'm saying, 1990 when I revisited General Park and my other friend who was a medical doctor at the Samsung Hospital, also 20 years younger, they would take me to the village, you know, because they wanted to find this girl, you know. Well, wouldn't it be nice, you could, you know, after all these years, it'd be nice, yeah. So we go into a little eating, there was a house, but it was also an eating place. And so we're sitting at the table, we're eating, and they're showing the pictures. Do you recognize anybody? Do you recognize? And they're only speaking in Korean. And all the time that we're sitting there, it was a rectangular table. The lady was at the end of the table, I'm at one side, my friend is on the other, and they're looking and talking. She never looks at me, the lady. She never talks to me, only to them. Then when it was time to go, we had finished eating everything, I said to General Park, you know, we're eating with her, we're talking and everything. Gee, it'd be nice to know. I just curious, what's her name? You know, what's her name? So the young lady's name was Park Inja. Okay? So my friend turns to me and says, she says that her name is Park In Soo. Now I knew the custom, Park In Ja, Park In Soo. So I looked at her like this, you know, she read my face, you know, she knew I was trying to make a connection between the name, and she went like this, no, 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 no. In other words, she didn't say don't make a connection, but no, 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 you know, don't make a connection. All right, now we're really ready to go. We're ready to get up to go. She turns and she looks at me and she says in English, why you come now? So I don't know what to say. So we get up, go. When we go up, Parker tells me, you know, this lady must know something. Why is she saying, why you come now? Too late.
So what does that mean?
I don't know. What does that mean?
So that's the story that you want.
That's the story of India. That's how it finished.
So when did you leave Korea for
I
United
left
States?
in late '54. I left.
I think you worked in the headquarters and you know the whole sort of overall situation around the armistice and so on. What is your opinion about the Korean War? Why was it so forgotten to the people's minds in the
It was
United
too near
States?
World War II, number one. It was too close to the end of World War II. In 1945, everybody wanted to get war out of their mind. They didn't want to know. The government reduced the army to nothing.
Demobilization.
The military, they demobilized. That's why they weren't prepared in Korea. I mean, the poor guy feels so sorry for the guys that were there in the beginning. I mean, they were wearing clothes that weren't appropriate for Korea. The bullets were from 10 years ago. Some of them didn't even fire. I mean, it was a madhouse. When winter came, they had no winter clothes. They were completely unprepared, and people just. And then it was not. It was the first time that the United States entered a war without declaring war. There was no official congressional declaration of war. So it wasn't a war. And the newspaper, nobody said war. It was like, well, we sent soldiers to Korea. And, you know, there many times Korean veterans came home and people said to them, hey, I haven't seen you for a long time. Where you been?
Exactly.
I mean, it was that remote and everything.
So what do you want to say to that?
I don't blame anybody. It was just the history of the times. And the fact that they did not declare war, that put it out of their mind. So the media, everybody, relatively low coverage. And Vietnam, no declaration of war. Iraq, no declaration of war. Afghanistan, no declaration of war. Technically, we've been fighting for 50 years and no declaration of war.
And that war lasted 60 years after an official ceasefire. Next year will be the 60 years anniversary of Korean.
Technically, they're still at war because an armistice just means you're not going to shoot at each other. Now, I think this shows, to me, a profound difference in the Asian mind and the European mind. Now, when the Europeans, meaning the UN, the United States, sat down at that table at Panmunjom, in their mind was World War I, World War II. What happened in those wars when they signed an armistice? Within months, peace treaties were signed. When they sat down, they thought that in a couple of months the peace treaty would be signed. But I'm willing to bet my life that when the North Koreans sat down there, they had no intention of signing anything until it was completely favorable to them. And they were already willing to be there for 60 years. They'll be there for another 40 years.
But it was
They'll
also,
be there for 2 generations and 3.
but also it was for the case of South Korea. They didn't want to sign the armistice. That's why there was no South Korean representation at the ceremony. So,
But even without South Korea, nothing was going to be signed because the North Koreans really, they don't want to. They're going to wait until it's advantageous to them before they're going to sign anything.
That's why I think there has been a severe trench war to gain even an inch, right? And
Yeah, and the fighting at the last day of the war was just as intense as the first.
exactly. So it lasted 60 years, and we are technically at war right now.
But nobody says that.
And
Nobody-
Korean War veterans are the most legitimate parties that can say enough is enough and let's end this war with the peace treaty.
But you can't. North Korea doesn't want it.
Exactly. There are many things unresolved from North Korean side, but symbolically, would you be willing to say that enough is enough and say
It's unfinished. In one sense, it is unfinished because there's no peace treaty. But in one sense, I'm going to speak for myself. I don't want to speak for every Korean veteran. But I'm very, very satisfied and very happy when I see the Korea of 1950 and the Korea of 1960 when I revisit in the year 2000, and I see the Korea of today. How could you say that we were unsuccessful?
you are? No, definitely.
I mean, you want to pick and say, well, there's no treaty, there's no this, no that. Hey, North Korea wanted to take over South Korea and they didn't. And South Korea has prospered and North Korea, they're where they are.
No question, no question. There is no Korea what it is now without the sacrifice and the involvement of the American military there. Absolutely. But it's been 60 years. There is
Yes.
no war lasted 60 years.
And it's gonna, as I say, it may last another 40, maybe even longer.
But we don't want to go divided like that because of the Cold War
Well,
already ended in 1991.
I've studied history all my life. I was even a history teacher. And from what I see of what happened in other situations, I cannot see North and South Korea ever united. Ever united. The only way they could ever be united is if China ever becomes a true democracy. Because China doesn't want a democracy on their border. And they're never going to they're going to help North Korea enough to survive and have a 1 million-man army and to keep them separate. So unless they go, it's going to be like that. Now, people say, oh, look at Germany, East Germany, West Germany. Yeah, but East Germany and West Germany were not separate countries. South Korea and North Korea are recognized nations in the UN. That's a very different relationship. You don't unite two nations the way you unite the North and South in the Civil War. Because people have made comparison to the American Civil War. It's like the American Civil War. The North is fighting the South. No, it was one country invading another.
That's a very important point that you just made. And what do you think is the legacy? I think you already mentioned some of it, but the legacy of the Korean War.
I wonder what it's going to go down in history and so forth and so on. I don't know what the legacy is. For me, the important historical military is, and constitutional for this country, for the future of this country in terms of our constitution, is that no war was declared. And no war has been declared since. Now, this is not the true American way. In other words, the politicians have circumvented Congress, and they're doing what they want to do. Because our tradition was only Congress declares war.
Exactly.
I mean, you had the Marines went to Tripoli, but that was just a company or two, but no major engagement was ever gotten into without congressional approval. And I'll go one step further. I think that is one of the indications of the weakness of the United States. Because no politician has the nerve to even suggest making a declaration of war, because the people will say, no war, no war, no war. Now, if you're not willing to go to war for what you believe, isn't that a weakness? Now, who's fighting our wars since Vietnam? Because even Vietnam was not declared. Professionals. Did we have a draft for Afghanistan? No draft. The politicians can't even ask for a draft. It wouldn't be accepted. So you're hiring mercenaries. The regular army man is, it's not a nice word, but he's a professional soldier. That's what And to me, that's a weakness. I see old Rome and old Greece when they were at their height and they started to hire the so-called barbarians. And they,
Mercenary.
yeah, you know, from France and
Yeah.
Germany, and the Greeks from Turkey and Russia, and they were starting to fight the wars for them, and then that was the beginning of boom.
Excellent point that you made. Do you have a lesson that you want to share with the young generations in the United States and also in Korea out of your service during the Korean War? What is the lesson for us?
I don't know.
Any comments for the young generation?
What could I tell the young generation, whether you're Korea, American, I can't, you can't give them advice. You just hope, I just hope that they will be involved and they will know what's going on, because most of the people in America really don't know what's going on. You have a presidential election, only 50% of the people vote. Okay? Now 50%. 25% vote for one candidate, 25 vote for the other. That means if you can convince 26% of the population, you can be president.
Excellent.
20, that's nothing.
Yeah.
1/4, if you can convince 1/4 of the population, you could be president. Now, to me, that's not a good thing.
That's not a good
There's
policy.
no involvement. You talk to young Americans, they don't know anything about anything.
Mhm.
You ask them questions. These are people that graduated high school, maybe even went to college. Can you name one founding father? No, I don't know any.
That's why we are doing this Korean War veteran digital
To teach your
memorial.
young people.
Because
Definitely.
young generations working in the website, in the cyberspace. So my kids will do work with the grandchildren of
Right.
yours through Facebook and Twitter, so that they can
Yeah.
have access
They
to
have
your
to be educated, yes.
interviews and
You have
pictures.
to be educated. If you don't institutionalize concepts and principles, they're lost. And that's what's happening here. We're losing a lot of our principles because they're not actively being taught and told.
Thank you, Thomas, for the interview, and I'm reconfirming the Korean nation's thankfulness to all men and women of Americans who fought for the nations.
That's
Thank you so
something
much.
that Korea veterans appreciate very much. When we talk to each other, we are astounded at the thankfulness of the Korean people. We just can't get over it. Like, my God, they can't stop saying thank you. So I say thank you to you.
Thank you very much.
감사합니다.
감사합니다. 네.